And we see how some of these discoveries were first made now on BBC Two on the voyage of Charles Darwin.
If England were to suffer the full force of an earthquake, how completely the whole country would be altered. What a terrible destruction there would be of human life. Famine would go forth with pestilence, and death following in its train. Who can say how soon such a thing might happen? In the autumn of 1834, after crossing the mighty range of the Andes, our expedition set out once more for the Pacific coast. In my saddlebag, I carried the fossilized seashells that seemed to me to afford the final proof that those great summits had been pushed up out of the sea by an endless succession of earthquakes. But my excitement was soon dispelled. On the way down, I began to feel quite ill.
Don Pedro, señora Angélica, ya estamos de vuelta. Vengan a darnos una mano que un caballero viene enfermo.
Whether the cause was a bite from some poisonous insect, I never discovered. But I believe it affected my health for the remainder of my life.
Gently, Darwin. Careful with him. Careful.
Anduvo apunando el caballero.
In Valparaiso, bad news awaited us. In the previous year, Captain FitzRoy had purchased a second vessel with his own money to help in surveying the coast. I was astounded to learn from Wickham that this ship, the Adventure, was now up for sale.
She'll be sold tomorrow by order of the Admiralty. Half the men are to be paid off, the rest come back aboard the Beagle. So you'd best reclaim your cabin as fast as you can. We may be somewhat overcrowded.
How's FitzRoy taking it?
Pretty badly. You saw the state he was in before you left. He thinks his career's in ruins. He's even taken to railing against you. You know, you two are like a couple of boys in a seesaw. The higher you ride up into your mountains, the lower the captain sinks.
That's absurd, Wickham. We're the best of friends.
Oh, you're friends, all right. But don't forget, I've been watching you for 3 years now. When you're riding high, he feels his genius is rebuked. He's really only at his best when you're being seasick.
What nonsense you talk. Where is he now?
In his cabin. Hasn't been out of it for days. You have a care, philosopher. This isn't just one of his moods. This is something altogether different.
FitzRoy? It's good to be back.
So, it's you, philosopher. Where have you been the last few days?
I've been away 4 weeks, FitzRoy.
Have you? Oh, yes. So you have.
Things on board? How have they been?
Why do you ask, Darwin?
They tell me you've been working very hard.
They tell you. They tell you. And what else do they tell you? Do they tell you about this?
That you've had a letter from the Admiralty, yes.
Oh, read it, Darwin, read it! I am reprimanded by their lordships for purchasing the adventure with my own funds. They flatly refuse to reimburse me. Won't even pay for 20 extra men. Have you ever been officially reprimanded, Darwin?
No, I haven't.
Neither have I before this.
Surely they can't question the success of your mission. This coast's never been so well charted.
From now on, the Beagle will have to do the work of 2 ships.
You're not considering going south again?
Did you doubt it, Darwin?
The crew won't like it, FitzRoy.
I've told you many times before. The crew don't choose in my ship. The crew don't choose!
Of course they don't. Look at that, FitzRoy. A fossilized seashell. Do you know where I found that? 12,000 feet up in the Andes. Isn't that amazing? Once it was on the seabed, and somehow those great mountains over there...
Darwin, have you come in here deliberately to provoke me?
No, of course not.
You're trying to provoke me.
I assure you...
Why do you persist in trying to undermine my beliefs? We've been over this before. The Bible tells us how the earth was created. Why do you so persistently set out to undermine its authority?
I don't in any way set out to challenge its authority on religious matters, FitzRoy.
Then whose word are we to take as gospel? God's or yours?
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned it. My work is tedious to others. I've been ill, you know. The people in Valparaiso were very kind, very hospitable.
So I hear.
Caulfield and his friends, they looked after me.
You must thank them.
I have already.
I suppose I shall have to give a great reception for them all here on board.
Oh, I don't think that would be necessary.
What?
I don't think they'd expect it.
How typical. How typical of you.
I merely...
You are exactly the sort of man who would take favors and feel no obligation. You are a sponger, Darwin. That's what you are, a sponger.
What would you call it, Bino?
A morbid depression of spirits, and a loss of decision and resolution.
Or permanent?
Oh no, he'll get over it, so long as he doesn't kill himself first.
Well, come on, Bino, he's hardly likely to do that.
The previous captain of the ship committed suicide in that very cabin. You know that, Sullivan. And FitzRoy's uncle killed himself too. It's in the family. Yeah, that should help a bit.
That letter was all he needed.
He was going to fill up every blank space on the charts between Patagonia and Peru. This was to be the greatest survey voyage ever made.
I'm afraid his ambition has turned into an obsession.
He certainly doesn't bend to circumstance.
Oh, confound you, Darwin. I warned you not to provoke him. Last night he had me pacing the decks till midnight.
I'm sorry, Wickham, I should have waited.
Where is he now?
He's still in his cabin. I've just come from him.
And?
He says his orders were to survey the coast fully, and he's failed in his duty.
No one could have achieved more. And what did you say, Wickham?
I was not permitted to say anything.
He's resigned his captaincy. He wants me to take command. Well, it's done. For better or worse, the adventure has a new owner.
I trust she's gone to a good home.
Jose Ribeiro. Looks like some kind of Mexican smuggler. You know, gave me an odd feeling in there, putting my name to the deed of sale.
You'll get used to it.
Still, it was a fair price. $7,500 to include all sails and upper work. $1,500 more than the captain paid for it.
So, what will you do now?
Complete the work on this coast and hope the captain recovers. If not, return to England. Nothing will induce me to take the ship back to Tierra del Fuego. What about yourself? You're welcome to stay aboard, you know.
Thank you, yes. But the truth is, I want to return to those mountains.
So, you'll be leaving us?
Yes. Let's cross the Andes once more, then head for Buenos Aires, and then see if I can catch a ship going home.
Well, good luck. Won't be the same without your collection all over my deck.
You don't really think it was my fault, do you?
No. No, if you ask me, it was going to happen anyway.
Enter.
The mail from home, sir. A merchantman dropped anchor last night.
Another from their lordships at the Admiralty. No doubt instructing me to sell the Beagle at the first opportunity, to the lowest bidder. Thank you, Mr. Wickham. When do you plan to sail south?
I've been studying our orders, sir.
I hope you have, Mr. Wickham. You're in full command now. My chief regret is that I have to embarrass you with my continued presence here. This cabin shall be yours at the first opportunity.
There's no need for that, sir.
I insist. Perhaps I can return home aboard this merchantman as soon as you head south.
I'm not going south, Captain FitzRoy.
The survey, Mr. Wickham. It's incomplete.
It's the best survey that's ever been done on this coast.
With 2 ships, I could have finished the task to perfection.
But you have fulfilled your orders, sir. Now let me read you this.
I know what the orders say, Mr. Wickham. I would prefer to concentrate on my mail. They're your orders now. I have resigned this command.
May I sit down, sir?
Please.
North of Tierra del Fuego, the Beagle will survey as much of the west coast of South America as time permits, and then proceed across the Pacific. Sir, I don't believe you heard me.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wickham. Just a trifle ironic. My promotion from commander to captain is finally confirmed.
Well, that's wonderful news, sir. It's what you've been waiting for.
My resignation stands. Now, as to these orders, what are you suggesting?
It's quite clear, sir. Our instructions are to survey as much of the coast as time permits. That gives us 5 more months here before we head west for New Zealand. Now, I have 2 proposals to make, sir. 1, we proceed no further than Cap Tres Montes, which gives us time to complete this section of the coast as far as Valparaiso. And 2...
Yes?
I propose that you resume command of this ship, Captain FitzRoy. Without you aboard, the Beagle will be instructed to return to England. Every man in this ship wishes you to resume command, sir.
This could be the best chance of your career, Mr. Wickham. You're a fine man, Mr. Wickham. I wish their lordships could have been present in this cabin this morning.
I'm heartily glad they're not.
I think we should give a great reception for all the hospitality we've received in this port. The British consul, Edwards, would know who to invite, the Intendente and other notables. And some pretty girls, Mr. Wickham. I think we all need our spirits raised.
I'll see to it, sir. And can I pass the word?
Very well.
Cuando ustedes entraron al puerto, se me dijo de que eran contrabandistas.
The Intendente says that when you first entered harbour, it was reported to him that you were smugglers.
Smugglers? Well, the Admiralty would be most distressed to hear we gave that impression.
Did he take much persuading? Not a great deal. If you ask me, part of his mind had never relinquished command anyway. Now that he's shaken off his depression, he's a different man.
Behaving as if it never happened. He's done that before a few times.
Yes, well... if you upset him again, Darwin, with another row about religion or your damn geology...
I won't, I promise. We're the best of friends again.
Good. Well, come on. We must do our share of the entertaining.
Now, careful on the stairs, careful. Darwin. Oh, excuse me, sir. This way, ladies.
Well, this is where we spend most of our time off duty.
What you do?
Oh, eat, sleep, write letters. It's not very exciting, I'm afraid.
But it's so small. How many live here?
On the ship, more than 70.
Oh.
About 10 of us in here, but not all at once. Some of us are always on watch. Would you like to see my berth?
Oh, yes.
Right, this way, ladies.
Darwin.
Ladies first. There's not a lot of room for entertaining, I'm afraid.
Venimos en paz. Traemos buen voluntad al pueblo chileno. I'm afraid my Spanish is not what it was. Would you explain to the Intendente that I too have been concerned with politics?
Él dice que era también ligada a la política.
¿Él tiene intenciones de ser presidente de su país?
He asks, do you have plans to become president of your country?
Not exactly. I stood for Parliament at Ipswich shortly before the voyage.
And lost?
And lost, as Mr. Darwin says. Had I won, none of us would be here now.
Which party did you stand for?
The Tories. I spoke against the Reform Bill. I'm afraid it did my career very little good. The Admiralty, which is full of Whigs, thought it unseemly for a naval officer to engage in public discussions in the marketplace.
I wish I could have seen you, FitzRoy. What did you find to say in defence of rotten boroughs?
You must forgive us, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Darwin shares my cabin. We agree to differ on certain things. I said, as I recall, that one does not strike a whole tree to the ground when confronted by a few diseased branches.
But if a tree is rotten to the very roots, Captain...
You make my point for me, Mr. Edwards. Ours is the constitution of the Nile, Waterloo, and Trafalgar. It is the envy of the world.
Darwin, I think we should join the ladies.
You take this ship, Mr. Edwards. Fine sailors, all of them. But the voting qualifications in England are now so low, there is nothing to stop them from voting one of their number into Parliament. that the sort of England one wishes to see?
I'm warning you, philosopher, leave him alone. One word out of place now, and he'll be back inside his cabin for a week.
I thought religion and geology were the two banned subjects. That was politics.
Why don't you go and play hide-and-seek with the senoritas instead of making trouble with the captain?
I wish I had the trick of it. But I don't have Sullivan's instant winning ways.
No, all right. Did you feel that?
What?
I'm not sure. The ship seemed to shake. Probably a wave catching our midships.
There's hardly any swell. Very odd.
There, you see? Just like a garden swing.
Oh, careful!
It's all right. Come on, move up. I think it's my turn.
What happened?
I'm not sure. The whole ship seemed to shudder. I think she may have touched bottom.
I make it 3 separate tremors since yesterday, but nothing very severe. Our guest took them seriously enough. I never saw people go over the side quite so fast, especially the ladies.
They probably think it's safer on land than out here in the bay. In fact, the reverse may well be true.
They're concerned for their property.
Indeed. Edwards feels the tremors may continue. In which case, I may have to find a new anchorage.
Oh. I had hoped to take Covington ashore to collect a few more specimens. And to see if there are any visible effects. With your permission.
As things stand, I can see no harm in it. But don't go inland. Should I have to find more sea room, I should hate to leave you stranded.
Once ashore, we skirted the edge of the harbour.
What's it to be today, Mr. Darwin? Beetles, stones, shellfish?
Whatever we find, Covington.
The general air of calmness caused me to think that we might have been misled. No one confronted by that peaceful scene would have supposed that the local people lived under the constant threat of earthquakes.
Buenos dias.
Buenos dias.
It's too hot for walking. We should have waited for the cool of the evening. What did Mr. Wickham want with you as we were leaving?
He said...
Yes?
He said, for pity's sake, no more rocks. The ship's ballasted enough. What is it, sir?
Another earth tremor. It must be.
Where can we run to, sir?
Nowhere, I'm afraid.
It lasted 2 minutes, but appeared much longer. To experience an earth tremor at once destroys the oldest associations. The world, the very emblem of all that is solid, moves beneath your feet like a thin crust over fluid. One second of time conveys to the mind a strange idea of insecurity, which hours of reflection would never create. A few days later, we rode into a village near Concepcion. It presented the most awful spectacle I ever beheld.
When did this happen?
More than 100 people were known to have met their deaths in the area, and many still lay buried in the ruins. The earthquake came on with tremendous violence and gave no notice. The constant habit of these people of running out of their houses instantly on feeling the first tremble undoubtedly saved them. Shock succeeded shock at intervals of a few minutes, and the sky became dark from the dense cloud of dust. No one dared approach the shattered ruins, and no one knew whether his dearest friends and relations had not perished from want of help. I shall never again laugh when I see people running out of their houses at a trifling shock. This was thought to be the worst earthquake ever known in Chile, though the worst is probably always the last. Not even the wind that blows is so unstable as the crust of this earth. But the most remarkable effect was the permanent elevation of the land. The old line of the tide had been obliterated, and the local inhabitants were all quite certain that one little rocky shoal, now clearly exposed, had formerly been covered by the sea. All round the bay, the ground appeared to be upraised by 2 or 3 feet.
Let's drop the course. That'll do the topsail and the gallop. Gallop right up. Bit more in the course.
In September, we set a course for the Galapagos Islands, some 600 miles west of the South American mainland and directly on the equator.
Come and look, Mr. Darwin. Porpoises.
These highly intelligent mammals of the ocean actually appear to be seeking out the company of man and darting through the bow waves of the ship for our personal amusement. As we neared the islands, we came upon a huge manta ray or devilfish. The graceful movements of its large pectoral fins were like the wings of a great bird flying beneath the water.
Back to work, you men. You've all seen irons before.
From a distance, these volcanic islands appeared to be little more than barren rocks. But there was something mysterious about them, which excited the interest of everyone on board.
Los Islas Encantadas.
The Enchanted Isles. And why do you suppose they're called enchanted?
Oh, for the beauty, I suppose. Why else?
Not so. I've heard people speak of their remarkable ugliness.
Now, please, Captain, no stories of beautiful sirens luring us to destruction.
No. They're called enchanted because of the currents which run between the islands. They're so strong that the Spaniards, who first came here, thought their galleons were bewitched. They would set a course on one heading and shortly afterwards find themselves on quite another. So have a care, Mr. Wickham.
I will indeed, sir. And, Galapagos. What does that mean?
Tortoises.
Got one, have we?
How much fresh water do we have left?
To hazard, Captain, enough for 10 more days.
But once we're ashore, take a boat, see if you can find a stream.
Aye, Captain.
And watch these currents. She's sure to drag her anchors.
Aye, Captain. Carry on, coxswain.
The place had a forbidding aspect, and we planned to stay no longer than it would take to make soundings and provision the ship. I had no idea of the revelations which now awaited me.
So I imagine the infernal regions might be. First ring of hell. I never saw such ugly creatures. This place is fit for pandemonium. Let's move inland before we lose our reason.
Never before had we seen lizards that swam and fed in the open sea. If these repulsive creatures were indeed unique, and the islands proved to be the result of relatively recent volcanic eruptions, what profound questions it raised in the mind. The lava had been permeated like a sieve by subterranean gases. In places it had formed great bubbles, and where these had collapsed, circular pits remained. A few small trees and shrubs had taken hold, surviving on the little moisture that ran down into them. Above the lava field, we could see many small volcanic cones. I counted 60 of them, their regular forms giving the countryside an artificial appearance, as if the hand of man had been at work. It vividly reminded me of the numerous great iron foundries in Staffordshire.
Covington, look.
I think they must be the imprints of trees. Must have burned very slowly to leave such a clear impression.
Is this the root, sir?
No, I don't think so. Looks like another branch to me.
Immense deluges of lava had burst from small vents on the flanks of the craters, or flowed over their edges like pitch from the rim of a boiling pot, engulfing everything in their path. In its descent, the lava had spread over many miles of the coastline. As it cooled, intricate patterns were formed. In some places, it was as smooth as a lake, gently ruffled by the breeze. In others, it reminded me of the sea, frozen in the midst of a storm.
Darwin, where are you?
Look at this lava, FitzRoy. Might have been thrown up yesterday. I doubt if you'll agree with me, but it's my belief that these islands are of much more recent origin than the South American mainland.
On the contrary, my dear philosopher, I had reached the same conclusion myself. Some form of violent eruption must have taken place on the bed of the ocean.
Do you think the islands were ever joined together?
They're too dispersed, and the water in between appears to be immensely deep.
Where the lava had tumbled directly into the sea, the coastline was of a most forbidding nature. Amidst this desolation, the only objects to take my eye were the crabs, a multitude of brightly colored creatures eking out an existence on the waterline. Passing sailors called this crab the Sally Lightfoot. They would hardly have given them such a pretty name if they had seen the ferocity with which the Sally Lightfoot cannibalizes its own kind. Sometimes things which appear repulsive to human sensibilities can be a feature of the struggle for survival in the natural world. As the tide receded, the crabs were joined by the remarkable sea-going lizards. Previous visitors had come to the conclusion that they must live on fish, but after examining the stomach contents of several of them, I found no trace of fish and decided that they must live entirely on seaweed. To the best of my knowledge, they are the only land-based creatures on Earth that seek their food on the bed of the ocean. The lizard's feet are partially webbed, and they have strong claws which ensure a firm grip on the slippery rocks. Although they're extremely common throughout all the islands, I never saw a single lizard more than 10 yards inshore from the rocky headlands they favour. One should not be deceived by their stupid and sluggish movement on land. Once in the sea, the lizard swims with perfect ease and quickness. The legs are held quite motionless against its side. All the propulsion comes from the movement of its body and flattened tail. But for creatures so well adapted to the sea, we were surprised to discover that they would sooner allow a person to catch them by the tail than enter the water. Instinct seems to have taught these creatures that the shore, not the sea, is their place of safety. The lizards spent much of their time sunbathing, attended by mocking thrushes in search of ticks. Sometimes they lay quite flat to extract heat from the larvae. At other times, when too hot, they raised themselves clear of the larvae to catch the cooling breezes. In this way, they regulate their body temperature. On some islands, the male lizards were uniformly grey. On others, they were brightly coloured. Puzzled by this, I began to speculate whether each island might have its own distinct species of marine lizard, and why this should be so. Certainly the fierce currents and the numerous sharks would have made it virtually impossible for them to swim from one island to another. Such thoughts reinforced my growing belief that the natural history of the Galapagos was eminently curious.
It's not surprising the South Americans send their criminals here. It's about all it's fit for.
Yes. I think I'd rather be dispatched outright than spend the rest of my days in this place.
You're here nonetheless, Wickham. I always said Her Majesty's Navy was only 1 degree better than a penal colony.
Welcome back, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Winter. At your ease, gentlemen. I'm sorry for this stifling heat. There's little we can do unless the wind gets up. It's cooler in here than it is ashore. How's the water situation, Mr. Wickham?
It's still serious, sir. I'm afraid we'll have to go on to half ration soon.
Well, I thought it might cheer your spirits to know that tomorrow we shall be heading for Charles Island to pay our respects to the acting governor. He's an Englishman by the name of Lawson. More to the point, he has an abundant water supply.
Did the philosopher return with you, sir?
Yes, he's on his way to the chart room to start unpacking his specimens. And, needless to say, full of new theories which were never in the Book of Genesis.
Though the Galapagos had long been frequented by buccaneers and whalers, the only permanent settlement was on Charles Island. A green, thriving vegetation covered the higher craters, but the lower parts maintained the same rugged aspect. A short distance inland, we came to a lake of salt water, dotted with greater flamingos wading in search of food. I marveled that any creatures could exist there. But this was a living world within itself, adapted to an inland lake of brine. Almost every part of the globe, salt lakes, the depths of the ocean, the upper reaches of the atmosphere, even the perpetual snows, appear to be capable of supporting some kind of organic being. Such is the power of creative force. Life exists in all of them. In the uplands, we came upon the largest inhabitants, from which the Galapagos Islands take their name. Tortoises are found in considerable numbers on all the islands of the Galapagos, frequenting both the higher, damper regions as well as the lower, more arid parts. They were like some antediluvian monsters, or even the inhabitants of another planet. I took the opportunity to exercise my skill in horsemanship, but their lurching motion was a far remove from my hunter at home. With their lumbering gait, long life and set pattern of existence, they looked as ancient as time itself. But the same great questions persisted in my mind, though now more forcefully than ever. If these islands proved to be a much more recent geological formation than the continental mainland, 600 miles away, how had these awkward giants made their way here? FitzRoy's response to the problem was to look no further than the hand of God, leaving the matter until the day of judgment, when all mysteries would be revealed. But I could not bring myself to accept that those extraordinary islands, with all the teeming life they supported, were the result of one simultaneous act of creation. In the higher, damper regions, there was no shortage of food for the tortoises, which caused me to wonder what attracted them to the more barren coastal regions at all. They are particularly fond of an apple-like fruit called the manzanilla. This fruit is poisonous to man.
Wellington, give me that cloth, will you?
Just to touch it can bring on a painful irritation, and we exercised great care during our collecting. But the poison has no effect on the tortoises. The fruit passes through their guts quite unchanged, except in color. If it was of no benefit to them as food, I could only guess that it had helped them with their digestion.
Tortoise hunters.
Buenos días, señores.
Buenos días, señor. Bueno, ¿desea un poco de sopa?
Ah. Sí, gracias.
Tortoise soup. Could you ask him why the tortoises come up all this way?
Señor, ¿por qué suben los Galápagos hasta acá arriba?
Prefieren tuna. Como necesitan mucha agua, tienen que subir a la laguna de estas áreas.
Sí, gracias. He says that they prefer the cactus lower down. But since they're such prodigious drinkers, they have to make their way up here, as the only ponds are found in these central areas. It would seem they have very much the same problem as we do with the ship. They have to take as much water aboard as they possibly can, and then make it last as long as they can.
I wonder how long it takes them to get up here.
Señor, ¿cuánto tiempo necesita para subir?
Caminan de noche y hacen alrededor de 8 millas en 3 noches.
He says they usually travel at night, and they can cover 8 miles in 2 or 3 nights.
I dare say Wickham will get a few more knots out of them.
Amongst the hissing fume rolls and sulfur vents, the huge reptiles made their way towards the drinking ponds. In one respect, the tortoise is very similar to the frog. In areas where water is extremely scarce, it has developed the trick of using its bladder as a reservoir. If the local people are overcome by thirst, they will sometimes kill a tortoise and drink the contents of its bladder. Out of curiosity, I did the same. It was very slightly bitter in taste, but otherwise quite palatable. During the breeding season, there was much competition between the large males for the favours of the much smaller females. She would often use the opportunity to make good her escape, and in the pursuit that followed, I saw tortoises moving at the maximum speed of which they are capable. It was hard to decide whether the female had a genuine desire to escape her fate, or whether she was simply displaying what we might regard as sweet, reluctant, amorous delay. Undoubtedly, the ritual ensures that only the fittest and strongest of the males will propagate the species. From this union, up to 20 eggs will be produced, though nothing like that number of tortoises can be expected to survive. Both the eggs and the newly hatched young are a prey to birds and other scavengers. The following evening, the governor entertained us in unexpected style.
Veal, perhaps?
Your guess, Captain FitzRoy?
I'd say more like pork.
Wrong again. Gentlemen, you are eating, and apparently enjoying, tortoise a la Galapagos.
Of course, we should have guessed. We've been falling over the creatures ever since we arrived. Darwin even took a ride on one of them.
In these parts, a day out tortoise hunting will feed a whole family for a week.
How many people live here, Governor?
Oh, about 200. Mostly convicts, a few hunters. Some of them have settled down and started families. They don't give much trouble. The main thing is that they don't have to work for their existence. Just go out and shoot a couple of tame birds. There's your supper. It's when the ships come that the slaughter begins. I once saw the sailors from a British frigate kill more than 200 tortoises down on the beach in a single day.
How long can it go on?
Well, at the moment there's no shortage, but in 20 years' time things may well be different. Jose, some wine. Mr. Darwin, some of these giant tortoises live to an immense age. After dinner, I'll show you something. My prize specimen.
Doesn't life become rather tedious at times? For you personally, I mean, Mr. Lawson.
I'm used to it. I wouldn't want to go home. Well, I suppose I will one day. I do suffer a few minor discomforts. My books and papers all go mouldy, and we can't keep the salt dry. But I live well, there's no doubt about that. There you are, gentlemen. You don't often see one as big as that. Not these days, I'm afraid.
He's vast. How much would he have weighed alive?
Upwards of 600 pounds, I shouldn't wonder. 6 sailors tried to get him into a ship's boat. They couldn't manage it, so they upended him and left him on the beach to die, poor old soul. He was a good age. Look.
1786. That's nearly 50 years ago.
He was probably twice as old as that. Whoever carved that date would hardly have bothered unless he'd been a pretty fair size already.
Which island did he come from?
James Island.
Is that where all the larger ones are found?
No, you find a large one anywhere. It's really a question of the shape and pattern of the shell.
You mean the tortoises from each island are distinctly different?
Absolutely. You show me any tortoise you like and I'll soon tell you which island he came from.
But the terrain and vegetation is the same on each island?
Oh, yes, they all eat cactus and so on. But when you've been here as long as I have, you get to know the difference. For instance, a tortoise from Hood Island has a thick shell in the front, turned up like a Spanish saddle. one we had for dinner came from James Island. They have a better flavour. It's really a question of the shape of the shell.
I think we should be getting back to the ship. You've been most kind, Governor.
Not at all. A new face is always welcome.
We had expected the Galapagos to be rocky and barren. Now I was filled with wonder at the amount of creative force displayed all around me. I would never have imagined that a group of islands, 50 or 60 miles apart, formed of precisely the same rock, placed under the same climate, and rising to nearly equal height, could produce such a variety, sometimes within a single species. It was not merely their distance from the mainland, but their distance from each other which provided me with the clue I was seeking. By whatever means the various forms of life had first reached these shores, carried on the wind or the feet of birds, floating pieces of driftwood, and however many different species had survived that perilous crossing, the possibility that changes had occurred after their arrival, even within the confines of a single species, could no longer be dismissed or ignored. In the Galapagos, both in space and time, I felt myself brought within reach of that great fact, that mystery of mysteries, the first appearance of new beings on this earth. I began to feel quite ill.
Don Pedro, señora Angélica, ya estamos de vuelta. Vengan a darnos una mano que un caballero viene enfermo.
Whether the cause was a bite from some poisonous insect, I never discovered. But I believe it affected my health for the remainder of my life.
Gently, Darwin. Careful with him. Careful.
Anduvo apunando el caballero.
In Valparaiso, bad news awaited us. In the previous year, Captain FitzRoy had purchased a second vessel with his own money to help in surveying the coast. I was astounded to learn from Wickham that this ship, the Adventure, was now up for sale.
She'll be sold tomorrow by order of the Admiralty. Half the men are to be paid off, the rest come back aboard the Beagle. So you'd best reclaim your cabin as fast as you can. We may be somewhat overcrowded.
How's FitzRoy taking it?
Pretty badly. You saw the state he was in before you left. He thinks his career's in ruins. He's even taken to railing against you. You know, you two are like a couple of boys in a seesaw. The higher you ride up into your mountains, the lower the captain sinks.
That's absurd, Wickham. We're the best of friends.
Oh, you're friends, all right. But don't forget, I've been watching you for 3 years now. When you're riding high, he feels his genius is rebuked. He's really only at his best when you're being seasick.
What nonsense you talk. Where is he now?
In his cabin. Hasn't been out of it for days. You have a care, philosopher. This isn't just one of his moods. This is something altogether different.
Look at that, FitzRoy. A fossilized seashell. Do you know where I found that? 12,000 feet up in the Andes. Isn't that amazing? Once it was on the seabed, and somehow those great mountains over there...
Darwin, have you come in here deliberately to provoke me?
No, of course not.
You're trying to provoke me.
I assure you...
Why do you persist in trying to undermine my beliefs? We've been over this before. The Bible tells us how the earth was created. Why do you so persistently set out to undermine its authority?
I don't in any way set out to challenge its authority on religious matters, FitzRoy.
Then whose word are we to take as gospel? God's or yours?
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned it. My work is tedious to others. I've been ill, you know. The people in Valparaiso were very kind, very hospitable.
So I hear.
Caulfield and his friends, they looked after me.
You must thank them.
I have already.
I suppose I shall have to give a great reception for them all here on board.
Oh, I don't think that would be necessary.
What?
I don't think they'd expect it.
How typical. How typical of you.
I merely...
You are exactly the sort of man who would take favors and feel no obligation. You are a sponger, Darwin. That's what you are, a sponger.
What would you call it, Bino?
A morbid...
And we see how some of these discoveries were first made now on BBC Two on the voyage of Charles Darwin.
If England were to suffer the full force of an earthquake, how completely the whole country would be altered. What a terrible destruction there would be of human life. Famine would go forth with pestilence, and death following in its train. Who can say how soon such a thing might happen? In the autumn of 1834, after crossing the mighty range of the Andes, our expedition set out once more for the Pacific coast. In my saddlebag, I carried the fossilized seashells that seemed to me to afford the final proof that those great summits had been pushed up out of the sea by an endless succession of earthquakes. But my excitement was soon dispelled. On the way down...
Depression of spirits, and a loss of decision and resolution.
Or permanent?
Oh, no, he'll get over it. So long as he doesn't kill himself first.
Well, come on, Bino, he's hardly likely to do that.
The previous captain of the ship committed suicide in that very cabin. You know that, Sullivan. And FitzRoy's uncle killed himself, too. It's in the family. Yeah, that should help a bit.
That letter was all he needed.
He was going to fill up every blank space on the charts between Patagonia and Peru. This was to be the greatest survey voyage ever made.
I'm afraid his ambition has turned into an obsession.
He certainly doesn't bend to circumstance.
Oh, confound you, Darwin. I warned you not to provoke him. Last night he had me pacing the decks till midnight.
I'm sorry, Wickham. I should have waited.
Where is he now?
He's still in his cabin. I've just come from him.
And?
He says his orders were to survey the coast fully, and he's failed in his duty.
No one could have achieved more. And what did you say, Wickham?
I was not permitted to say anything. He's resigned his captaincy. He wants me to take command. Well, it's done. For better or worse, the adventure has a new owner.
I trust she's gone to a good home.
Jose Ribeiro. Looks like some kind of Mexican smuggler. You know, it gave me an odd feeling in there, putting my name to the deed of sale.
You'll get used to it.
Still, it was a fair price. $7,500 to include all sails and upper work. $1,500 more than the captain paid for it.
Sir, what will you do now?
Complete the work on this coast and hope the captain recovers. If not, return to England. Nothing will induce me to take the ship back to Tierra del Fuego.
FitzRoy? It's good to be back.
So, it's you, philosopher. Where have you been the last few days?
I've been away 4 weeks, FitzRoy.
Have you? Oh, yes. So you have.
Things on board? How have they been?
Why do you ask, Darwin?
They tell me you've been working very hard.
They tell you. They tell you. And what else do they tell you? Do they tell you about this?
But you've had a letter from the Admiralty, yes.
Oh, read it, Darwin, read it! I am reprimanded by their lordships for purchasing the adventure with my own funds. They flatly refuse to reimburse me. Not even pay for 20 extra men. Have you ever been officially reprimanded, Darwin?
No, I haven't.
Neither have I before this.
Surely they can't question the success of your mission. This coast's never been so well charted.
From now on, the Beagle will have to do the work of 2 ships.
You're not considering going south again?
Did you doubt it, Darwin?
The crew won't like it, FitzRoy.
I've told you many times before. The crew don't choose in my ship. The crew don't choose!
Of course they don't.